So, usually when you watch a boxing match, right, there is this, well, a very clear, predictable logic to it.
Yeah, absolutely. One fighter lands, a flawless knockout punch, and the fight is basically over.
Right. The opponent goes down, the ref counts to 10, and you just pack up and go home. It's clean.
But you're measuring that victory entirely by the sheer impact of that one single strike.
Exactly. But imagine if, right after that perfect knockout punch, the guy who is lying flat on the mat he doesn't concede. Instead, while he's down, he just reaches into his glove, pulls out a match, and sets the entire boxing ring on fire.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And suddenly the referees, the spectators in the front row, the folks selling hot dogs in the back, the whole arena is trapped in this massive blaze.
Right. And nobody in the arena actually knows where the fire exits are anymore. And I mean, that's exactly what we're looking at today. We are dealing with a geopolitical arena that is currently engulfed in that exact kind of blaze.
Yeah, it really is. So to set the scene for you listening, it is Thursday, March 12, 2026. For the past 12 days, the entire world has been absolutely glued to this massive, multi-front conflict unfolding in the Middle East. It's been designated Operation Epic Fury.
Which is quite the name.
It is. And the mission for our deep dive today is to take this really massive stack of real-time geopolitical intelligence, economic situation reports, and military assessments, and try to actually make sense of them. We need to understand the mechanics of how a highly targeted, technologically superior military campaign just, well, practically overnight, exploded into a global economic crisis.
Right, a crisis that is, as of this morning, actively dictating everything from the routing of global shipping lanes to, the actual price you are paying at the grocery store right now.
Exactly. But before we really get into the weeds here, we need to do a quick but absolutely crucial rule check. We are looking at highly sensitive, intensely politically charged material today. We've got actions and statements from the U.S., Israel, Iran, Russia, China.
There are a lot of players on the board.
So many players. And our goal here is not to take a side. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints or the military actions that we're going to discuss. We're simply here to impartially report the facts on the ground, synthesize the raw data for you, and help you understand this incredible tectonic shift in global security.
Yeah, I mean, it's about looking under the hood of all this chaos to see the actual engine that's driving it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start with the initial shock. February 28th, 2026.
Yeah.
United States and Israel launch Operation Epic Fury. And the sheer scale of the opening move is honestly hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. I mean, the numbers are staggering.
Right. In the span of just 12 hours, they execute 900 strikes. And this begins with what the intel calls a decapitation strike, the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, along with dozens of senior military officials.
Yeah, it was an immediate, massive blow to the command structure.
Exactly. And over the next few days, the coalition hits thousands of targets across almost every province in Iran. And militarily, they achieved something that looks like total victory on paper. I mean, Iran went from firing roughly 480 ballistic missiles and drones a day down to just 40.
Wow.
That's a 90% collapse in their strike capability in a matter of days.
But the nature of that collapse is what we really need to look at here, because this wasn't just Tehran pulling its punches, or making some sort of tactical retreat. The coalition forces, using B-2 bombers and F-35 stealth fighters, they fundamentally broke the physical machinery Iran needs to fight a traditional war. They systematically dismantled Iran's A2AD capabilities.
Okay, well, let's pause there for a second, because A2AD is one of those terms that gets thrown around in think tanks a lot. Anti-access and area denial. But what does that actually look like on the ground, like to a layperson?
Right. So think of it as an invisible, highly layered dome of sophisticated radars and surface-to-air missiles. It's designed to make it basically suicidal for enemy ships or planes to enter a specific geographic area.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so once you punch holes in that dome, you instantly have air superiority. And once the coalition had air superiority, they didn't just, target the missiles sitting on the launch pads. They went after the really vital underground industrial facilities. For example, they hit the Sharud and Parchin complexes, which house these things known as planetary mixers.
I have to admit, planetary mixers sounds like a high-end appliance you'd buy for a sci-fi kitchen.
It really does, right? Like a super futuristic KitchenAid. But in reality, these are massive, highly specialized pieces of industrial engineering. They weigh tons, and they are incredibly difficult to manufacture or replace.
And what exactly are they mixing?
Their sole purpose is to perfectly mix the volatile chemicals required to create solid missile propellant. And solid propellant is crucial because it allows ballistic missiles to be stored fully fueled and launched on a moment's
Oh,
notice.
wow.
Yeah, so by blowing up those mixers, the coalition didn't just destroy the arrows, so to speak. They destroyed the entire factory making the arrows. And they also effectively neutralized the Iranian Navy as a conventional fighting force in the process.
I mean, I get the mechanical brilliance of that from a tactical standpoint, but I do have to push back on the narrative we're seeing in some circles that this was a clean or like sterile victory. Because the human and financial tolls in the intel tell a very different story.
Absolutely. The fallout is severe.
Right. Inside Iran, we're seeing reports of over 1,700 individuals killed, over 100,000 displaced, and massive strikes on civil industrial facilities. That includes major oil storage complexes in Tehran. Human Rights Watch is actually actively investigating strikes on civilian areas by both sides, including an Iranian school.
Which is just a tragic consequence of this scale of bombing.
Yeah. And then on the coalition side, over 140 U.S. troops have been wounded, including some fatalities. Israel is reporting casualties from incoming fire, too. And then there's the financial burn rate. The Pentagon ran through $5.6 billion worth of munitions in just the first 2 days alone.
$5.6 billion in 2 days.
Right. So going back to our boxer analogy from the start, the U.S. and Israel successfully broke the boxer's arms. But instead of throwing in the towel, Iran realized they couldn't win a punching match, so they defaulted to their core strength.
Yeah, stripped of that ballistic missile deterrent, Iran immediately pivoted to asymmetric warfare, and they executed this pivot under the leadership of Mojtaba Khamenei, the late Supreme Leader's son. He was rapidly elevated to power, which sent a very, very clear signal of institutional continuity.
Meaning they weren't going to just fold.
Exactly. It was a complete refusal to capitulate to the coalition's demands for surrender.
But if your conventional military is essentially a smoking ruin, how do you actually continue fighting superpowers?
You weaponize geography. Iran activated what they call their Ring of Fire. This is their vast, totally decentralized network of regional proxy militias.
It's almost like trying to take down a massive corrupt corporation, but they've hidden all their actual operations in dozens of different shell companies. You can arrest the CEO, you can seize the headquarters, but the shell companies out in the field just keep operating completely independently.
That is a great way to look at it. Because of this proxy network, the conflict horizontally expanded across 13 different countries almost instantly.
13 countries, that's wild.
Yeah, you have Lebanese Hezbollah firing relentlessly into northern Israel, which has forced intense Israeli ground raids and airstrikes across southern Lebanon. You have Iranian-backed militias launching strikes at U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, which is prompting coalition airstrikes in response.
Right, but the part of this proxy strategy that is absolutely terrifying the global markets right now is happening on the water. The Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
The ultimate choke point. Exactly. Iran's strategy has been to essentially close and mine this incredibly narrow, vital maritime choke point. The intel shows the U.S. military reported using a submarine to sink the Iranian frigate Iris Dana, and they destroyed 16 active Iranian mine-laying vessels just to try and keep the strait open.
Which is a massive naval engagement in its own right.
Right, but then an Iranian naval commander goes on the record and essentially dares Western commercial ships to come closer and try to pass through. And what I don't get is, if the U.S. Navy is right there blowing up Iranian mine layers, why are commercial ships still so terrified to cross?
Well, it's because of the underlying mechanics of global shipping, which surprisingly ultimately come down to insurance.
Insurance, right?
The Strait of Hormuz is the central artery of the global energy system. About 20% of all global seaborne oil and 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas transits through that specific tiny stretch of water. And sea mines are cheap, they're dumb, and they are incredibly effective.
So even if the Navy clears most of them.
Exactly. Even if the U.S. Navy destroys 99% of the mines, the mere statistical possibility of a commercial oil tanker hitting that one remaining mine causes maritime insurance premiums to skyrocket overnight. And if a shipping company cannot get affordable insurance for a vessel, that vessel does not sail. Period.
Wow. So it's not even about Iran having to sink 100 ships. They just have to make the environment dangerous enough that the insurance actuaries sitting in London decide the route is entirely uninsurable.
And that right there is the core of Iran's doctrine here, cost imposition. By targeting the energy infrastructure of U.S. allied Gulf states and threatening that strait, they are intentionally inflicting shared economic pain on the entire planet. They are trying to force the international community to step in and restrain the U.S. and Israel just to stop the economic bleeding.
Which means the geopolitical fire has jumped straight out of the Middle East and landed right in your wallet.
Yeah.
The economic shockwave over the past 12 days has been staggering. I mean, looking at the numbers, Brent crude oil spiked to nearly $120 a barrel.
Which is a huge jump.
Massive. And in the U.S., gas prices jumped 17% in just 10 days. We blew past $3.53 a gallon, hitting over $4 in a lot of areas. And the global markets just completely panicked. I was looking at the sheer evaporation of wealth, $3.2 trillion in global equity value wiped out in 96 hours.
Just gone.
Gone. South Korea's KRSPI index crashed 12%, triggering emergency circuit breakers just to halt trading so people could catch their breath. Terrified investors flooded into safe havens, pushing gold past a massive $5,300 an ounce.
Yeah, and the term that keeps macroeconomic strategists awake at night right now is stagflation.
Right, stagflation. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. It is the toxic combination of stagnant economic growth and high inflation. When energy costs surge this violently, the cost to manufacture, to package, to transport, absolutely everything goes up.
Because it all runs on oil and gas.
Exactly. So inflation, which central banks had spent the last 2 years desperately trying to lower, is suddenly spiking again. The immediate real-world consequence for you listening right now is that central banks, like the Federal Reserve, are basically forced to delay any anticipated interest rate cuts.
Ah, so if you were waiting for mortgage rates to finally come down so you could buy a house, or you were hoping the cost of a car loan would ease up, that's just off the table.
Yeah, borrowing stays incredibly expensive, while the broader global growth engine starts to sputter out because the energy required to run it is simply too costly.
And you really see that engine sputtering when you look at the supply chain paralysis in these briefings. I mean, over 4,000 daily flights have been grounded because the airspace over the conflict zone is practically closed. Major hubs like Dubai and Doha are severely disrupted. Air freight costs from Asia to Europe have skyrocketed 45%.
And the maritime data is even worse.
Right. On the water, nearly 170 massive container ships are just trapped. Commercial vessels are now being forced to detour all the way around the Cape of Good Hope around the southern tip of Africa. And the brief says that adds 15 days to transit times. But why does a 2-week delay cause such a catastrophic breakdown in the global supply chain? Like, surely they could just wait 2 weeks.
You would think so, but it creates a cascading logistics failure. The global supply chain operates on what's called a just-in-time model.
Okay, meaning they don't hold a lot of extra inventory.
Exactly. Ships are scheduled to arrive at ports at highly specific times to unload, reload, and move on. When you add 15 days to a journey, those ships aren't returning to Asia to pick up the next batch of shipping containers on time. Suddenly, you have a massive shortage of empty containers in China, while full containers pile up at ports waiting for ships that are 2 weeks late.
Oh, man.
This creates port congestion, factory backups, and massive delays for everything from clothing to electronics.
It makes you ask a really uncomfortable question. If a localized military conflict can instantly inflate the cost of everything from the jet fuel in a cargo plane to the manufacturing cost of the semiconductor sitting inside the phone in your pocket, just how fragile is our hyper-globalized world?
It's immensely fragile, and that fragility is exactly what an asymmetric strategy exploits. Iran knows it cannot win a dogfight in the skies over Tehran against F-15s. So they are fighting the war in the global commodities and logistics markets instead.
Well, if the global economy is bleeding out from this, why aren't the superpowers stepping in to stop it immediately? I mean, when you look at the geopolitical chessboard in these reports, the so-called allies don't seem to share the same end goals at all.
No, not at all. You have fundamentally divergent objectives at play here. Israel's leadership views Operation Epic Fury through a maximalist lens.
Maximalist meaning they want to go all the way.
Yes. They see this as a rare generational opportunity to permanently eradicate Iran's nuclear infrastructure and completely dismantle that proxy network surrounding their borders. To sustain this, the Israeli cabinet just moved to add $13 billion to their defense budget. They are preparing for a total systemic dismantling of the threat, regardless of how long it takes.
But then you look at the United States, and the messaging is incredibly divided. On one hand, President Trump is officially demanding the unconditional surrender of the Iranian government and threatening to hit them 20 times harder if they continue to block shipping.
Right, projecting overwhelming force.
Yeah, but on the other hand, he's making statements claiming the war is very complete and will end very soon. It seems like a clear attempt to calm down the volatile stock market and, lower those gas prices.
It's a very difficult balancing act for the administration.
Especially because, meanwhile, behind closed doors in classified briefings, U.S. senators are reportedly expressing profound anger. The Pentagon is burning through billions in munitions, troops are getting injured, and lawmakers are asking, what is the actual exit strategy here?
And while the U.S. and Israel navigate this internal friction, the roles of the strategic spectators, Russia and China, are honestly fascinating. They're essentially using this crisis to further their own grand strategies without firing a single shot.
Right. Let's take China, for instance. They rely on Iran for roughly 80% of their shipped oil. You would think that vulnerability would force Beijing to intervene immediately to calm things down.
Exactly. If my main gas station's on fire, I'm calling the fire department.
Right. But China is officially refusing to offer formal security guarantees or military support to Tehran. Why let your main oil supplier burn?
Because Beijing's broader geopolitical calculation overrides their short-term oil needs. They're perfectly willing to let the United States expend its strategic resources, drain its political capital, and critically deplete its precision munitions stockpiles in a Middle Eastern quagmire.
Oh, wow. So they're playing the long game.
Very long. Every billion-dollar bomb the U.S. drops in Iran is one less bomb they have available for a potential future conflict in the Pacific.
That is, well, it's chilling. And what's wild is that Moscow is playing an equally calculated, opportunistic game. The intelligence shows Russia is actually feeding critical, real-time intelligence to Iran regarding the positions of U.S. military assets.
Yeah, keeping them in the fight.
But they're carefully avoiding any direct military conflict with the coalition themselves.
Because the war is serving Russian interests perfectly. First, it completely distracts Western military and diplomatic attention away from Ukraine. Second, Russia is a massive oil producer. They are under heavy international sanctions, and this massive spike in global oil prices directly benefits their economy.
Right, they're selling oil at $120 a barrel now.
Exactly. They are essentially funding their own ongoing military operations off the back of the panic in the Strait of Hormuz. Both Beijing and Moscow are content to just sit back and watch the conventional powers exhaust themselves against an asymmetric adversary.
So with all these moving parts, the military degradation, the economic chokeholds, the fractured alliances, where does this actually go? The final piece of this intelligence briefing is the probability analysis for how long this nightmare lasts.
Yeah, the analysts have mapped out 3 potential paths forward. Scenario 1 is the short war, which they give a 20 to 25% probability.
Okay, but how does a short war even happen at this point, with everything so inflamed?
Basically, within the next few weeks, the U.S. points to the undeniable destruction of Iran's missile sites, declares a tactical victory to calm the global markets, and initiates a pause. Iran, facing severe infrastructural collapse at home, tacitly accepts the de-escalation without ever formally surrendering.
So everyone just quietly backs away.
Right. The Strait of Hormuz is quietly cleared. Oil prices normalize. But the underlying tensions remain entirely unresolved. Iran simply takes the time to rebuild its proxy forces in the shadows.
Basically, kicking a highly explosive can down the road.
Yeah.
But analysts only give that a 20 to 25% chance. So what is the most likely outcome?
Scenario 2 is regional attrition, sitting at a 45 to 50% probability. This is a grueling 1 to 3 month proxy war. The U.S. finishes its conventional bombing campaigns, but the Iranian government survives and digs in deep.
Down the strait.
The Strait of Hormuz remains a highly contested, incredibly dangerous zone that requires constant naval escorts for any commercial shipping. Oil stays structurally elevated above $100 a barrel, cementing that global stagflation. And crucially, this is where we see cyber warfare aggressively escalate.
Like, honestly, we're already seeing the leading edge of that. The briefings show hacktivist syndicates like Hand-Hack have been compromising Israeli energy companies and drone defense systems.
Exactly. If kinetic weapons and missiles are depleted, the war moves out of the physical sky and into the digital networks governing our critical infrastructure. Water treatment plants, power grids, financial systems.
Which brings us to the worst-case scenario.
Yeah. Scenario 3 is the long strategic conflict, which analysts give a 25 to 30% probability. This is a devastating multi-year war. Israel and the U.S. escalate beyond military targets and begin systematically destroying Iranian civilian power grids and water desalination plants in an attempt to force a complete regime collapse.
Oh, God. And how does Iran respond to that?
With its back completely against the wall, Iran responds by launching whatever hidden long-range munitions they have left at major population centers in allied Gulf states. The end result is mass civilian casualties, the total collapse of the Gulf economic hub, a severe global recession, and the U.S. forced into a multi-trillion-dollar military mobilization.
It is a terrifying spectrum of possibilities.
Yeah.
And, taking a step back, it highlights the ultimate irony of these past 12 days. Operation Epic Fury did exactly what it was designed to do. It neutralized targets, dropped precision munitions, and achieved its stated tactical goals with devastating efficiency.
Yeah, it was a masterclass in conventional strike capability.
Right. Yet a strategic lasting victory remains entirely elusive because Iran refuses to play by the conventional rules of warfare.
They absorbed the sheer kinetic force of the tactical blow, and then they shifted the entire battlefield to the global economy.
The speed of it is what really stays with you. I mean, a decapitation strike in Tehran sent out a geopolitical shockwave that traveled at the speed of light. Within days, it was dictating the price of a gallon of gas in the United States, grounding flights in Dubai, crashing stock markets in South Korea, and forcing massive container ships to sail around the southern tip of Africa. It is absolute proof that in our hyper-connected world, there is no such thing as an isolated conflict.
No, there isn't. Which leaves us with a profound question to consider. Something that goes far beyond the immediate tactical briefings we've been looking at today.
What's that?
Well, if the world's most advanced militaries, utilizing stealth bombers and precision munitions, can completely dismantle a nation's conventional defenses in a matter of days, but that same nation can still bring the global economy to its knees simply by weaponizing its geography and activating its proxies, what does this mean for the future of military deterrence?
Wow. Have we entered an era where traditional military supremacy, simply having the biggest guns, the best radars, and the most advanced jets, is no longer enough to actually win a war?
It really seems like we might have.
That is the thought we will leave you with today. The boxing ring is on fire, and the old rules of the match clearly no longer apply. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep looking past the surface, and always keep questioning the headlines.